What inspired me to take on Unseen was one, incredible people working behind the camera that were very moved by the story that they were telling. And two, when you look at human trafficking, it's $1 billion industry, which is really scary. And that tells me that there's not enough of a spotlight being shown on this tragedy that's happening in the world. And then with the advent of social media, growing up, I wasn't in high school when Instagram was around. And now the access that, these adults have to these young children, without, a lot of parental supervision is really scary. So my goal is to kind of use my talent to bring awareness to, all of the shortcomings of the world. And this was a shining example of that. The relationship between the my mother in the film and my character was a close relationship, but then life happened, and this single mother was trying to provide for her daughter as best she could. And sometimes I think that when moms get into a position where they are trying to juggle the home life, the job, you know, also dealing with the teenage daughter that you're trying to give space and kind of do her own thing without her feeling babied. I think that sometimes that what seeps into that gap is social media. And there are all these things that as young women are learning and kind of taking on amongst themselves. And conversation, because my mother in the film was so busy, was kind of limited, because in the film you can tell that my character does in fact want to share with her mother the things that she's considering doing in order for them to be a little bit more financially stable. But the time limit that the mom had, my character kind of feels like, okay, well, I'm old enough to kind of deal with this on my own, and she'll be really proud of me when, I have money to help with the bills. And unfortunately, sometimes the best intentions don't necessarily always have the best outcome. I looked at some things online to study for my character, but most of it was the dynamic between my mother and my friend, and where I was in life. So just putting myself in the shoes of someone that like lives in a town that they don't want to live in. That alone gives you this sense of like escapism amongst itself, and so you're looking for every open door and every window that you can jump through to maybe find a better life and a better place for yourself, especially when you don't feel like you fit in. And again, young girls growing up in this day and age with social media and the constant comparison that goes on and the constant trying to measure up to what it is they see online, which in fact is not real, is really unfortunate. I think it puts a certain pressure and a weight on these girls. And so when you do have that pressure and that weight on you, you're constantly looking for ways to validate yourself. And so that was more of my focus, being a young girl that was trying to look for not only this validation, but a way to be seen, and not just by social media, but also by her mother. There have actually been, I do a lot of like philanthropy work. And so there have been a multitude of situations where I've sat down with women and young girls alike that have gotten caught in trafficking incidents. One was about a year ago, and I talked to a girl who was 13 when she got involved, actually here in Inglewood, California. And it happened because this older man in his 20s befriended a girl who felt as though on the outside she wasn't that attractive. And he was able to get into her mind and was able to create this fake relationship with her. And she began to have a connection with this man, and I saw her need for approval. And so that's why with my character I focused on the need of approval so much, because I saw that her want for this man's validation made her do so many things that she felt were really out of her character. I prior to the film, which is kind of what drew me to it, was that I did know a lot about the industry. Just because in talking to different women, I never want to say anything that would offend, and so I try to go in knowing as much as possible. So I don't know that I went in surprised as much as I went in excited to shine a light on this story. I hope that what's taken away from seeing this movie is conversation. I think that far too often there is a gap that happens, especially between parents and their teenage children, because they do want to give them space and they do want to allow them to go and live their lives. And, you know, as a teenager, you want the same thing. You want space. You don't want to be treated like a baby. But I'm hoping that seeing this film, creates a space for conversation between not just the parents wanting to have the conversation with their children, but the children feeling like, whoa, that if that could happen to me, maybe, you know, I'm not so opposed to being more open to talking about my parents, about the relationships that I hold through social media. You can now get a degree in social media marketing from USC. So, if that's the case, then we also should be talking about in schools the safety measures that we need to take in order to protect the youth that are on this platform. That's a really good question. What did I learn from myself about myself and Unseen? Um, I learned how fortunate I am. I do have parents that have a lot of conversation with me and did have a lot of conversation growing up, to where if there was anything that ever was even a little bit of a red flag, I felt comfortable enough going to my parents and telling them that something was happening that I wasn't quite comfortable with. And I also saw that on set with Elizabeth and Isabella. You know, they have a very open line of communication. And that was something that I really treasured with my parents. And to see it in another relationship is something that I really treasure. So I feel for the people that don't feel as though they have that, because it's really, really important, especially in this day and age.